Hello and welcome to our newest video. I'm Nick from nextstepnick.com. Let's leave the creepiness there. I'm joined by Lord Ash.
Hello everyone.
Hello, hello. And for Halloween we thought what better to go with the ghosts and the ghouls than a little bit of Bloodborne. So we're going to be looking at Bloodborne this week and having a look at a few bosses, what we like and what we don't like. What do you think about the game in general?
I like the game. It's not my favourite of the Soulsborne series, I'm afraid. I know a lot of people prefer it to sort of Dark Souls and things like that.
I think it's much quicker. I think it's a much quicker gameplay loop than you get in Dark Souls. So there's less blocking. If you haven't played the game before, there's a lot less blocking. You're encouraged to get in there and fight. Whereas with Dark Souls, you're encouraged to sort of get out of the fight quite a lot.
Think tactically. In Dark Souls, whereas this, it encourages you to keep attacking, because in this, when you get injured, you can keep hitting the enemy and recover some of your lost hit points.
Yeah, and I think that means that a lot of the boss fights are a lot quicker as well.
Yes.
So this first boss we're going to be looking at is a guy called Father Gascoigne. Now, he's pretty cool and pretty eerie. He's one of the first bosses in the game. That's one of the other things I like about this game, is there's so many sort of gothic tropes.
Yeah, very, very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, Victorian. Yeah.
Victorian, yeah.
There's a lot of that, and there's this symbolism as well, like for example Father Gascoigne, and this whole idea of hunters and this ancient hunt that's going on.
He's also one of the bosses that has actually not a massive impact on the story, but there are bits leading up to him that reveal subtle things about his character, if you find them.
He's very much steeped in lore, I think. There's a lot of lore behind the characters in the game, and much like all of the Dark Souls series, you can find it through the item descriptions and different interactions. So here's a bit of combat with him. He's really fast, and the game relies on you having to basically shoot to break up an attack pattern.
And hit him with what the game calls a sort of visceral attack.
Yeah, all of the cost.
Critical hit that deals significant more damage.
Yeah.
One of the first bosses, though, that's actually sort of the same size as you.
Yeah, I really like that. I think the thing is the speed is good because it's the same size.
Yes.
So you were saying about lore in the back sort of stage of the game, so this character is kind of steeped in that. And this is one of those examples. So if you talk to this window here, you're actually talking to his children.
Yeah.
And they ask you to find their mother, and they give you a music box. So that music box, if you play it when you're actually fighting against Gascoigne, because it reminds him of his wife, has a special effect on him, which you'll be able to see in a minute. But I think that's a really interesting thing. So it will actually stun him if you use it in the battle.
Yeah, he winces and it staggers him a bit. He's also the first boss you fight that has sort of phases in his boss fight. So on this one is his second phase. So he throws away his pistol and his single axe, and he uses the axe to make it a double-handed axe, basically.
Yeah.
And it can deal significant more damage to you.
Yeah, I think it's cool because, like we said, it allows for much better speed and flow in combat, but the problem is, whereas the camera is your enemy in Dark Souls and it's not as bad, in this, the camera is really...
It's almost, there's still lock-on, so you can lock on to the enemy, but there seems like a constant struggle between the lock-on and the camera. And as we can see here, he's actually in his phase 3 of the boss fight, where he turns into a werewolf.
Really cool.
Which is, again, it's part of the lore of the game in Bloodborne.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I really like this boss fight, is that it does include lore from the backstory of the game, so it does enhance the experience as you're fighting, which is great.
And there you are, just hitting a quick visceral attack.
Yep, and I think I burn him now, actually. Yep, there we go. But it's part of the game that everyone's kind of got this tinge, this underlying sort of dark side. I think
it's what's known as blood sickness, or something wrong with the blood. Bloodborne.
Exactly. And I think it's really cool. And after you fight that battle, you find a brooch that belonged to his wife, who's actually sort of dead nearby.
Yeah.
And it again just shows you a little bit more about the care that's gone into this boss. Now we're going on to one that neither of us are that keen on.
No, and the actual Soulsborne, Bloodborne community very much hated this boss.
Yeah, I think it's very much mixed, because some people don't mind them, but I really don't like Rom. So this is Rom. It's a spider boss, as you were saying before.
Another spider boss in this FromSoft game. There must be one employee at FromSoft, one game designer, who just wants a spider boss every single time.
Yeah.
Because we've had, obviously, Dux de Freya in Dark Souls 2. You've had Quelaag, which has got a spider boss body, and now you've got Rom the Vacuous Spider.
Yeah, so the major thing with Rom, I think, is that the difficulty doesn't come from Rom herself. It comes from her children, or like her spawn, which are these little spiders that stay around her, and during this first stage she won't even attack you, but you can't do damage from the front and she will turn and face you, so you have to get in on the sides. But the thing is those spiders spawn with her and basically try to stop you.
Yeah, they are very quick,
Yeah.
and they can hit you for a ton of damage. And like her, you can't hit them in the head because it will do minimal damage.
Yeah, and they will whenever she teleports around as well, she will summon a new brood of these spiders.
Yeah, so even if you wipe out all the spiders she summons, every time she teleports away after taking a certain amount of damage, more come in.
She also has some really brutal attacks. So during her phase 2, when you've actually done a bit of damage to her, she'll then start summoning in these spiders, but also doing attacks. And the magic attacks she's got, like here, you'll see a close range one here. They're very, very strong.
Yeah,
the damage they deal.
Her magic attacks pretty much can hit you at nearly every range, unless you're extremely far away, as you are here.
Yeah, and even then, there is a long range spell. It telegraphs quite well, so she has got specific movements for those spells, so you can tell what she's doing. Like here, it's a mid range spell.
Mid-range sort of area effect spell.
Yeah, there's a long range spell and a close range AoE as well, but there's a lot going on, and with the ads as well, it can be a real nightmare. So here's a long range spell here. If that hits you, it basically stun locks you. You get hit by a few of them.
Either stun locks you or just completely depletes your entire health bar.
She hits very hard. She has a melee as well, so if you get too close, she will start using her melee.
Yeah.
And then if you do get caught without any stamina and she starts doing a close range AoE, you're gonna die.
Yeah,
you're gonna get wiped out by
just
it.
there. Yeah. Again, that's partially what we were saying before. The camera's sort of fighting your character.
It's so difficult.
So you can't actually see what's happening.
And I think what makes it more frustrating is that ROM is a fight that you have to do before the story can progress.
Yes.
You then get this really eerie, very stereotypically Bloodborne Souls style cutscene. It's really fantastic. The cutscenes are so good in this game.
And as you said, it opens up the game from here. So it's a boss fight that you need to do. But a lot of people, including myself and yourself, have died fighting her. And I think she was the boss that made you quit the game originally.
She was, yeah. I originally quit playing against ROM, and I think the thing that ROM does as well is after opening the game up a bit more, there's a lot more large, and I mean incredibly large, enemies that you fight.
Yeah.
So this is the first example of one of the largest bosses you fight after her, and I feel like, whereas with Gascoigne, I really enjoyed the fight because he was the same size as me, there was speed, there was a lot of dexterity going on, you really have to think about how you move, using those ripostes, those
different
viscerals.
Phases of the fight, so you could tell how you were doing in the fight.
Yeah, and it feels like you're fighting against someone with a will that wants to beat you, that's fighting to sort of maintain their sanity and beat this world as well. Whereas then you get to these kind of bosses and they're just like, they're so big.
Yeah.
They look really impressive when they come in. So I mean, when this is the One Reborn,
The One
I
Reborn,
believe?
yeah.
Yeah, so the One Reborn looks great. I mean, to be honest, a thing made of lots of smaller things isn't exactly a new idea. We've seen it so many times.
It's
but
a thing that creeps up after you beat ROM. A lot of the enemies become this strange, sort of twisted, malformed shapes of what they once were, or the bosses are like a massive amalgamation of things.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that it looks interesting, but you can tell they were trying to push the PlayStation 4 because this was one of the first games out on the PS4.
Yes, it was, yeah.
There's some interesting mechanics on the fight. So, for example, there are casters above the One Reborn. So if you don't take them out first, they will basically hit you with these spells.
They
you have
will
to take them
also
out.
heal the boss as well.
Yeah, and that's a pain. But after that, it's just this mass of movement, and you can't really discern where anything is. Once these spellcasters are gone, you're basically just fighting against a big mass of stuff. It's not cool looking, because the problem is things can look fantastic in a cutscene because you've placed them there. They are scripted to move in this very eldritch way, drip out of this weird black shape in the sky. Once it's on the ground, it's just basically a mass blob thing. There's a lot of stuff moving, and the problem is, like here where I'm fighting, I mean, just to pour some poison, I've got to get out of that. I don't realise when I'm playing this, but the problem is that you can't really tell what's going on. Everything is moving, so you can't tell where exactly to look. And it just ends up a bit of a mess, to be honest.
It does. And like within this fight, there were moments where we were hitting it and it was staggering. So the creature wasn't attacking, so just wail on it. And like here, it did an area effect behind itself. So it was where you were not even facing.
The size is a disadvantage, and then you go to the other extreme, so then you start seeing large bosses that are just a pain because they're so big. So like here, for example, I fight against one of the amygdalas, which is kind of a major theme of the game. I won't go into too much detail there because it will spoil it for people who haven't played, but it's just a mess. I mean, I'm killed immediately there. But because of the size, and like we said, the camera is against you, with larger bosses in the Soulsborne series, you never really want to lock on, you want to do things free. I mean, have a look at this. You can't tell what's going on. I'm generally a bit worried in case people watching this get a bit of motion sickness, because it's just a mess.
Darts so quickly. You end up, as you see, glitching inside the boss.
Yeah,
You can't tell really what's happening. Like there, you're completely obscured. The screen, it's taking up like 4/5 of the screen.
I think the problem is that I can find a small enemy created well just as intimidating as something huge.
Because we were originally going to do, for those of you who know the game, we were originally going to do Mikolosh, who is an annoying enemy in the game. He's human-sized, but the fight itself is actually dripping with atmosphere. But we got to this boss and realised, actually, this boss is much more annoying because it's been designed to be so big.
Yeah.
The camera is acting against you and you can't really telegraph any attack. Like, you can't even tell what it's doing. All it is, you see the dust fly up like there, you've just gone inside its head because the camera can't focus in.
No.
And with this boss, you can only damage it, really do significant damage on its head or on its hands.
Yeah, it has very small slots where you could hit, and because everything is moving, it's just not great. And I mean, when you compare that to, we're going to look at another boss here, which is Vicar Amelia. And with her, she's on the large scale. She's a boss earlier on in the game. She's also steeped in lore, which I think is one of the other reasons why I like her.
Yeah.
The Amygdala plays a part to an extent. You know, they are in the lore of the game, but there's not really any specific thing about that encounter or that boss fight. Whereas with Amelia, again, you're fighting against someone who is stuck in this world, and you're fighting. It's like a battle of wills. You're interested in the character, and there's this really great introduction to her, which is dripping with atmosphere. This really dark, foreboding. She doesn't want to fight per se. You get this whole feel from her that she's just despair incarnate, so you're interested in fighting her.
Yeah.
And the problem is that she's on the larger scale, but you can very clearly see her telegraphed attacks. You can very clearly discern what she's going to do. You can see how she's going to move, and that makes her interesting. And then when you beat her, you feel like you've achieved something because you've learnt those attacks, you've learnt those moves, you've dodged them, as opposed to the Amygdala where, you know, you're just lucky, really, let's be honest.
And if you do want to learn about the lore, there's tons and tons of videos available. We're not going to go into it too much because we're not experts on the lore of Bloodborne. This is more of like just a little sort of comprehensive look at some of the things we liked, some of the things we didn't. But going back to like the Vicar Amelia, pretty sort of gruesome cutscene.
Yeah.
And where she transformed from like this innocent woman in white to this weird sort of wolf deer creature hybrid. But as you can see, it's a large boss. But
you can make what's going
on.
I think the problem with this fight,
you can telegraph her attacks as well.
Yeah, I like this fight and I like her character. The one thing I would say is you can see that at this point, this was one of the first games out on the PlayStation 4, and they were very much kind of pushing this whole idea of the PlayStation 4 being able to render new things.
Yeah.
So, for example, rather than messages on the floor like in Bloodborne, you had like little guys, the messengers that pop out of the floor.
Yeah.
Whereas you could have a basic creature. No, we're going to make it huge. We're going to cover it with hair. And the problem is the hair physics
was their sort of big thing with this game.
Yeah, and it just looks like a mess. The problem is that her design is fantastic. The wispy hairs kind of get in the way, and I think that's the problem. Is if you over-design a boss and you go too far, it has the opposite effect. It's not more interesting.
Like there's moments here where it's starting to take up so much of the screen. You're sort of like, I'm lost. I don't know where I am.
All I need is a good boss with great music and a good design. I mean, check this out.
Now this is one of the earlier bosses in the game. Depending on which way you go, you can either have Father Gascoigne as the first boss, or this, known as the Cleric Beast, as the first boss. And this is sort of the first inkling that there's something not right about the world of Bloodborne, Yharnam. But this boss, it's similar size to sort of the Amygdala, but it's done in a much better way. You can see the camera's moving with me when I'm dodging its attacks. You can see clearly what attacks are coming at you.
Yeah, the thing is that you can actually make out what's what, because the same thing has happened though. They have covered it in this weird downy fur slash feathery thing, so it's a bit hard to discern sometimes, but for the most part you can see the limbs, you can see the attack patterns, you can understand what's going on, and because of that it's a fun fight where you can learn the moves and feel accomplishment for beating it. Whereas where you've got a boss that's too big, then they just obscure themselves. I mean, here we're not clipping through the boss because It's large, it's not too large, and I think that's the point I would make, is if you give us a boss with a great move set, interesting lore behind it, a good design that isn't too complicated, and some fantastic music, then you've done a good job.
I hardly agree.
Yeah, but other than that, I'd just like to thank everyone for listening again today, and just tell you to make sure to like, share and subscribe so you stay up to date with all the latest videos. As well as that, don't forget to head over to nexttechnic.com to get all of the latest articles, reviews and news. And what are we doing next week?
Well, all I can say is you're not going to have a bad day. You're going to have a good day.
We're not going to have a bad time. We are going to have a good time. We're going to be looking at Undertale. I'm very excited. So thank you very much, guys, and we'll hopefully see you again very soon.